Hollywood Brown is now out at least 6 weeks, maybe longer, broke his foot. He re-injured the same foot that he had surgery on back in 2019.
Brown had brought them a dimension to this offense that hadn't really existed. They basically gave up like a razor and some shaving cream for freaking Robbie Anderson.
Look at the release.
There's your separation.
Great route.
Stutter and go. Gets by clean.
That is unbelievable.
Maybe the greatest catch I've ever seen.
Optimistic reports have him out at least 6 weeks. Would put him out until week 14, because the 6 weeks out will put him on the bye week, right? So it would be 7 weeks out. Week 14 now is when he is projected to come back at the earliest. What do you think? How does this impact the Arizona passing attack?
Yeah, I think this is a huge loss. I think Hollywood Brown was playing really well. You know, we just talked about him on the Dynasty episode with Zach Miller, right? Which was great because it was a good time to spotlight the fact that, you know, Hollywood Brown has been playing extremely well for the Arizona Cardinals. And really, you know, to a lot of Zach's points, I think that Marquise Brown's just been an underrated player. I talked about my theory on it is because, you know, Lamar Jackson is like a pet player for a lot of folks, like Twitter favorite, you know, stuff like that. So Marquise Brown got bagged on a lot as a first round pick for the Baltimore Ravens, but was really having a big year for the Arizona Cardinals, you know, and
huge.
This is what happens too with bad teams. It's like when one good thing happens, another bad thing has to happen. Like they're just getting DeAndre Hopkins back, then they lose Marquise Brown, right? For the long term. Brown had brought them a dimension to this offense that hadn't really existed, which was something of like a compromise. You know, they had never really had like another perimeter receiver that was going to threaten teams in the way that Brown was during the couple years they've had DeAndre Hopkins there, right? Like they have AJ Green there last year, but then their two other guys were a pure slot receiver in Christian Kirk and a fake receiver in Rondale Moore. So, you know, Marquise Brown was kind of could give them. I think Brown could have actually given them some good inside outside versatility with Hopkins back in the fold. Like I think he could have taken some of those Christian Kirk vertical slot plays and those routes, but you know, we won't know now. Obviously they make the corresponding move to trade for Robbie Anderson. And I mean, James, it's just insane. The resources that this team has spent on wide receivers since hiring just pass catchers in general, since hiring Cliff Kingsbury. You know, they spent a 7th round pick in 2019 on Caleb Wilson, a tight end. They spent a 6th round pick that year on Keyshawn Johnson, wide receiver, 4th round pick on Hakeem Butler that year, 2nd round pick on Andy Isabella that year. They traded for DeAndre Hopkins. They traded for Marquise Brown. They traded for Zach Ertz. They basically gave up like a razor and some shaving cream for freaking Robbie Anderson. They gave up a 2024 6th round pick and then a 2025 7. I mean, a 2025, James. That's how long is that in the future? So it's not a major trade, but no. I don't know. What's your thought on Robbie Anderson and how he fits here? Because I was definitely saying, you know, as Robbie Anderson is like getting in fights with his coaches on the sideline yesterday, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm sure teams are just lining up to take old Robbie Anderson, who's maybe had like 1.5 good seasons in his career, and it definitely wasn't last year. It definitely hasn't been this year. And, you know, he's got a big contract. I know the Panthers are going to eat a lot of that contract. And he's got, I mean, this is like not maybe his 10th, 12th personality related flare up so far.
You know, Robbie Anderson to me, right? Like he's 29 years old and he's flashed, right? Like he's had a couple of flash moments. He had a pretty good 2020 where he almost had 1,100 yards there. But he's been an inconsistent wide receiver, right? And I don't necessarily know if at 29 years of age, this is the guy that is going to help unlock this Arizona offense. Just some numbers here on Robbie Anderson. The last time you tracked him here, this was what, in 2020?
2020, yep.
65.8% success rate versus man. That's around the 35th percentile, so not very good. 77.7% success rate versus zone. That's in the 40th percentile. Again, not very good. How does he fit into this Arizona offense? Now, is it a situation where he can walk into that Hollywood role and maybe do some things, or is this just not a great fit?
I think look, it's bizarre because they've always kind of wanted some team speed, the Arizona Cardinals. Andy Isabella, team speed guy, Marquise Brown, speed
Right.
guy. But at the same time, dude, like they've never ever put together a vertical offense. Like Rich Rebar calls them the horizontal raid, making the air raid pun there. And like, that's what they've been, right? I mean, even Marquise Brown's sitting at about a 10 air yards per target number on the year. And that's actually climbed up in recent weeks. They've actually got him a lot of layup looks. We know Rondale Moore is never used down the field at all. Like, I mean,
Nope.
Rondale Moore, my God. Rondale Moore's at 5.2 air yards per target, which is like a huge upgrade from what he was last year. Look at Robbie Anderson's 2020 reception perception profile. Probably his best routes were like the slant, the flat, and the go. So I think that, again, that makes sense from a stylistic perspective. They're going to try to hit occasional big plays, but mostly it'll be quick hitting routes, trying to get guys in space against zone coverage and get some run after catch opportunities. That has pretty much been the Cliff Kingsbury offense. I think it's a huge downgrade from Marquise Brown to Robbie Anderson. I think that there are going to be people that look at it and like, oh, speed guy for speed guy, no big difference.
Right.
I think Marquise Brown is just such a better football player, such a more instinctual football player than Robbie Anderson is. I think Anderson is a maybe decent wide receiver 3, maybe. And he's on the latter part of his career, and he's a speed-based player.
Yes.
So, yeah, he's a role player. It's fine. They didn't give up much to get him. I think I'm gonna kind of go back and forth, and I'm interested what you think. Who's better from a fantasy angle for this team rest of season, like Rondale Moore or Robbie Anderson? I kind of go back and forth, and I can hear both sides of it.
With the acquisition now of Robbie Anderson, right? Like we know he's going to play outside. He's not going to play in the slot at all. So he's going to be the other outside wide receiver opposite of Nuke Hopkins, right? So now we know Rondale Moore for sure is going to line up in the slot, and we know for sure Zach Ertz is going to be out there playing, tight end / a fourth slot receiver.
Pretty much.
So for me, it's just like when you kind of take a look at what's going on there with the pass catching group. I would almost think, because everything is around the line of scrimmage right now, that Rondale Moore probably does a little bit better than Robbie Anderson, just because I think, again, there's going to be ramp-up time too, right? Like he's got to get to know this offense. They need to build a little chemistry between Robbie and the quarterback as well. So I would probably say rest of the season, Rondale Moore, I think in my mind, at least pretty easily, I think, gets a lot more volume and in the end just outproduces Robbie Anderson. By the way, who even knows where Robbie Anderson's head is at? You know what I mean?
I know, yeah.
Like mentally, where is this guy? Like we don't know. Is he ready to again just kind of suit it up and play football? It just, I don't know, man. There's something obviously going on with him. Getting in the face of his wide receivers coach like that, getting kicked off the team essentially, getting shipped out to the desert. There's stuff going on.